The dusty station of Redemption Creek was cloaked in ochre dust as the train screeched to a halt. Mai Lin, a petite Chinese woman, stepped onto the platform carrying a small, lacquered wooden chest in her hand. In her heart, a fragile hope still flickered. That after this long journey across an ocean and a continent, a home and a husband would be waiting for her. But the man who came to meet her, Franklin Pierce, a young merchant, showed no warmth at all. He glanced at Mai Lin's slight figure, her traditional silk garments, and the delicate features of her face. Franklin let out a bitter laugh, his voice cutting through the crowd. "I thought I was marrying a respectable American lady. Turns out I got an exotic pet from the Orient." No one could ever call that a wife. His words tore through Mai Lin's dream like a knife. Townsfolk murmured among themselves. Some laughed out loud. And a child pointed and shouted, "Look, the China doll!" Mai Lin stood frozen, her hands trembling as they clenched the handle of her chest. Tears welled up, but she forced herself to lift her chin, even though her heart was breaking. Franklin turned his back and walked away, leaving Mai Lin slumped on the wooden bench at the station. Surrounded by mocking laughter and contemptuous stares, she curled into herself, abandoned in a foreign land like someone cast out by the entire world. Only the desert wind howled through the dust, swirling around a Chinese woman left behind, clutching her chest in silence, with nothing left but humiliation. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Redemption Creek station as the sound of mocking laughter still lingered in the air. Mai Lin sat in silence, her slender shoulders trembling now and then. The lacquered chest rested by her feet, and suddenly the entire world seemed to shrink into a dusty corner of the wooden platform. Amid the noisy crowd, one man stood quietly watching. Jasper Thorne, a middle-aged rancher, wore a weathered leather coat, his grey eyes steady and his face worn with the marks of a hard life. He had lost his wife many years ago and had lived alone ever since on a patch of rugged land west of town. Jasper was not one to meddle in others' affairs, but something about the sight of the abandoned Chinese woman, her proud eyes trying to mask her shame, kept him from walking away. Without saying much, Jasper stepped forward. The crowd fell silent at once. Everyone recognized the rancher who kept to himself, yet was respected for his quiet resolve and the steady hand that was never far from his gun. He stopped in front of Mai Lin. She looked up, her tear-filled dark eyes sharp with suspicion, like a cornered animal ready to strike. Jasper offered no comfort, asked no questions. His voice was raspy and low. Just 3 words. "Come with me." Mai Lin froze for a moment. A storm of questions surged through her mind. Was this man trying to take advantage of her? Was it just another trap? But when she met Jasper's gaze, all she saw was the stillness of stone. No mockery, no pity. He bent down, lifted her heavy chest with one hand, then turned and walked away. Slow but certain. After a few seconds, Mai Lin rose and followed. She had nowhere else to go. The road out of town was choked with dust, and the wind lashed sand across their faces. Jasper rode his horse while Mai Lin walked beside him. Her thin silk slippers were quickly torn to shreds, her feet bloodied, but her posture remained unyielding. Neither said a word. There was only the creak of the saddle and the soft, determined footsteps of a woman too small for the world around her, eyes burning with a silent longing for a place to belong. By the time darkness fell, they reached a small ranch house nestled deep in the open prairie. The wooden cabin was humble, its fence leaning, the barn quiet. Jasper opened the door and gestured. "There is room for you in here. If you want to leave, do it in the morning. But if you stay, live like a human being." Mai Lin paused at the threshold. Inside her, doubt and hope collided fiercely. That night, when she stepped into the first room in years that had a roof of her own, she knew her life had just taken a different turn. On her first morning at the ranch, Mai Lin woke to the sound of roosters crowing mixed with the howling wind across the prairie. Pale light filtered through the cracks in the door, revealing the worn silk of her dress. The night before, she had slept on a hard wooden bed beneath a patchwork blanket that was worn but clean, carrying the scent of sunlight. For the first time in so long, her sleep had not been haunted by cold or fear. In the kitchen, Jasper had been up for hours. He tended the fire, smoke curling through the small window frame. Without a word of greeting, he pushed a simple bowl of porridge toward her, then returned to slicing cured meat. My Lin sat down and ate quietly, her dark eyes stealing glances at this solitary man. He was weathered and silent, but in all his movements, there was not a trace of contempt. The day passed slowly. Jasper led the horse out to the field while My Lin, without being asked, picked up a broom and began sweeping the floor, straightening the chairs, patching the curtain by the window with a needle and thread from her chest. Her delicate hands, more used to fine embroidery, were clumsy with the rough fabric, but every motion was filled with determination, a quiet plea to prove she was not useless. By afternoon, Jasper returned with a bundle of firewood. My Lin stepped outside to help, her bandaged feet pressing into the cracked dry earth. He started to wave her off, but when he caught the resolve in her eyes, he silently set the bundle down. Together, they carried it inside without a word. Only the sound of labored breaths mingling with the wind sweeping through the grasslands. Night fell, and they sat across from each other at the dinner table. The dim oil lamp cast a golden light on Jasper's sun-worn face and the delicate lines of My Lin's cheekbones. The silence was heavy, stretching between them. At last, it was My Lin who broke it, her voice soft. "Why did you bring me here?" "Out of pity." Jasper looked up, his steel-grey eyes catching the glow in the dark. His voice was calm. "No. I just did not want to watch them treat you that way." The answer stunned her. After so many years of being seen as a burden, no one had ever spoken to her as if she were simply a human being. That night, as she lay down, a strange sense of hope welled up inside her. She thought of a dream long buried, a home. A man strong enough to stand beside her. A child who would one day call her mother. Things that had once felt impossibly distant now flickered like a faint light within this old wooden house. Outside the wind howled long into the night. But within My Lin's heart, for the first time there was a fragile and precious sliver of peace. Rumors spread fast in Redemption Creek. The little Chinese widow had been taken in by Jasper Thorne at his ranch. Some scoffed, others whispered, claiming the lonely old rancher had lost his mind. But in the shadowy corner of the saloon, Franklin Pierce, the man who once wrote to claim her as a wife, ground his teeth. Publicly humiliated in front of the entire town, he could not stand the thought of My Lin, his bride on paper, finding peace in someone else's home. A week later, Franklin returned to the station with a thug named Ben Hatcher, a brute with hands like mallets and a face carved in scars. Ben was infamous in the region. Wherever he went, bloodshed followed. Franklin knew better than to face Jasper on his own, so he hid behind the shadow of violence. That afternoon, Jasper and My Lin came into town to buy flour, nails, and a few seed packets. The air on Main Street tightened like a drawn bowstring the moment they appeared. Conversations died mid-sentence, fingers pointed. My Lin walked beside Jasper, her small form a stark contrast to his rugged frame. Her dark eyes remained steady, but her hand clutched the fabric of her dress a little too tightly. Suddenly, Ben stepped into their path. His voice grated like gravel. "This woman belongs to my boss. Hand her over and walk away." Jasper stopped, gently setting the sack of seeds on the ground. His grey eyes scanned Ben before settling on Franklin, lurking just behind the hired gun. His voice was calm, but it rang clear through the silent street. "She does not belong to anyone. And she has chosen to be with me." The crowd held its breath. For a second, silence froze everything. Then Ben sneered, one massive hand resting on the grip of the pistol hanging at his side. My Lin stood behind Jasper, her heart pounding. But in her eye sparked something new. For the first time, a man was standing in front of her, not to shame her, but to shield her. The air was thick with imagined gunpowder. The slightest twitch could set it all off. Jasper shifted half a step forward, his right hand hovering near the Colt at his hip. In the fierce red light of the setting sun, his lean frame seemed forged from steel, like the whole prairie had gone still with him. At last, it was Franklin who blinked. Fear won out. He pulled Ben back and muttered, "Not here." Not now. They retreated, but Franklin's eyes burned with hatred. As Jasper and My Lin left the town behind, the whispers resumed. Some nodded in respect. Others shook their heads in scorn. But inside My Lin, only one thing echoed. He stood up for me in front of everyone. That night, back at the ranch, My Lin sat by the fire and spoke for the first time with strength. Her voice did not tremble. It was steady and clear. If you will have me, I will stay. I am not going anywhere. After the tense afternoon in Redemption Creek, Jasper's ranch became a rare haven of peace. My Lin tied her hair back, her nimble fingers gradually growing familiar with tending a small garden, mending torn shirts, and preparing meals. Jasper was a man of few words, but every morning, when he saw the small woman moving with quiet grace beside him, the emptiness that had long gnawed at his soul seemed a little lighter. One time, Jasper noticed My Lin's hands were raw and blistered from the unaccustomed work. Quietly, he left a small tin of salve on the kitchen table. My Lin found it and winced as she applied it, but did not push it away. Her deep dark eyes met his not just with caution now, but with something else. Gratitude. That night by the fire, My Lin spoke slowly in halting English. In my village, after my husband passed, they said I was a burden, to be sent away. But here, I feel warmth. Jasper did not answer. He simply added another log to the stove, letting the glow flicker across his sun-worn, wrinkled face. Then he gave a small nod. To him, home had ceased to exist the day fever took his wife and child. But now, maybe he did not want to live in that house alone anymore. Meanwhile, over in the Redemption Creek saloon, Franklin Pierce drowned his frustration in whiskey. The shame of that day still cut like a blade. He ranted to Ben Hatcher, voice slurring with drink. He stole that woman from me right in front of the whole damn town. If I don't take her back, what kind of man am I? Ben sneered, flashing a broken-toothed grin. Then let's wipe him out. One old rancher and one little foreign woman. Me and a couple of the boys can handle that. The plan took shape right there at the bar. One night, while Jasper was out checking the pasture, Ben and his men would ambush him and force My Lin to return as Franklin's property. Back at the ranch, Jasper and My Lin remained unaware of the storm brewing. They spent their quiet days building a new roof for the grain shed. When Jasper handed her a hammer, My Lin let out a soft laugh, a sound so unfamiliar it startled even her. Laughter had never been part of a life shaped by rejection. At night, Jasper sat on the porch, smoking his pipe, while My Lin sat nearby, mending a shirt, her small figure silent in the lamplight. In that silence, something burned low and steady, a fragile trust slowly kindling into warmth. But down at the far end of the valley, Ben's wagon wheels had begun to turn, carrying whiskey, gunpowder, and hatred. Darkness no longer meant the quiet of night. It now held the promise of a storm drawing near. A crescent moon hung low in the Arizona sky, casting a silver glow across the silent prairie. Wind whistled through the wooden fence, soft as a whisper in the dark. Jasper stood on the porch, his Winchester resting against the door frame. The old dog let out a low, growling bark, its hackles raised. Jasper knew something was coming. Inside, My Lin fed another log into the stove. Smoke curled into the air as firelight danced across her silk-clad shoulders. Her hand froze mid-motion. She had heard the dog. Her dark eyes gleamed with alertness, the instincts of a survivor who had endured much never truly fade. Then came the heavy thud beyond the fence line, the unmistakable sound of hooves pounding dry earth. Then more. Then many. Jasper tightened his grip on the rifle. They're here. Before he could say more, the window shattered with a crash. A bullet slammed into the ceiling beam. My Lin lunged and grabbed the short-barreled carbine Jasper always kept by the stove. Shadows moved across the yard. Ben Hatcher and 3 others, guns glinting under the moonlight. Ben roared, his voice wild and feral. "Hand the woman over, or both of you die tonight." Jasper answered with a thunderous gunshot, the bullet tearing up dirt right at Ben's feet. Gunfire exploded in reply. Windows shattered, firelight catching shards of glass flying through the air. My Lin did not flinch. She dropped to one knee, the carbine stock pressed firm to her shoulder, and fired twice. One man screamed, tumbling from his saddle with a thud. Jasper covered her, cold-eyed and precise, moving like a man who had fought in wars long past. Ben charged forward, axe in hand. My Lin hurled a heavy iron poker from the fireplace. The poker slammed into the fence post inches from his face. He stumbled, then roared, swinging the axe down hard on the fence. Steel flashed in the firelight. Jasper pulled My Lin back inside and shoved a heavy table against the door. "They're not coming through this threshold," Jasper said, voice like stone. My Lin looked at him, her eyes fierce and warm at once. For the first time in her life, she was not fighting alone. Outside, Ben and his men howled, hurling torches onto the thatched roof. Flames burst into the night, lighting their snarling faces. But inside the small house, a weathered rancher and a cast-out widow stood side by side, weapons ready, hearts beating as one. That night, the wind carried smoke, gunfire echoed with battle cries, and above it all, the fire-forged will to survive, and a new kind of faith being born from blood and flame. Flames roared as the thatched roof was devoured, ashes swirling into the night wind. Cattle in the barn wailed in panic, terrified by the gunfire and the crimson blaze. Jasper backed into a corner, reloading his Winchester, eyes locked through the narrow crack of the door. Outside, Ben Hatcher was circling around with the rest of his men, aiming to break into the barn and burn everything to the ground. "They're trying to burn the whole damn place," Jasper muttered, voice gravelly. My Lin stood beside him, sweat and soot streaking her pale face. Her body ached, but her dark eyes burned bright like live embers. She gripped the carbine tightly, then set it down. From her sleeve, she drew a long, sharp hairpin, its point deadly. "I will slow them," she said. Jasper shook his head. But before he could stop her, My Lin had burst through the side door like a gust of wind. It swung wide open and her slight figure appeared in the firelight, stopping the men in their tracks. Ben growled, dropping his axe and drawing a pistol, but My Lin was already on him, a blur of motion. She ducked under his arm, jamming the hairpin into the muscle of his wrist. He roared in pain, the pistol clattering to the ground. He shoved hard, and the two bodies collided and crashed to the ground in a brutal grapple. The others raised their weapons, but Jasper fired from the window. One dropped instantly. The rest ducked behind the wagon, too shaken to press forward. On the dry earth, My Lin and Ben wrestled. He was immensely strong, but she was quick and desperate. Her small hands clawed at his face even as he tried to pin her down. Blood trickled from a gash on her arm. But she fought with the fury of someone who would never submit. Ben bellowed and hurled her off with all his strength. They tumbled down the slope just behind the fence, kicking up dirt and sparks as firelight bathed the scene. He grabbed her hair, trying to slam her head against the ground, but My Lin's hand found a rock. A heartbeat later, she brought it down hard against his temple. He screamed, reeling. My Lin rose, her small body arching, dark eyes blazing with fury. With a cry that echoed through the entire valley, she grabbed his fallen pistol from the dirt and pressed the barrel to his throat. "You will never lay a hand on me again," she growled through clenched teeth. Ben gasped, blood seeping into the earth. When Jasper arrived, smoke still rising from his Winchester, he saw her. My Lin, small and unmoving in the flickering fire and ash, the heavy gun trembling slightly in her grip, but her gaze unwavering. Jasper placed a steady hand on her shoulder. His voice was firm and low. "That is enough. Tonight, we are still alive. That is victory." Ash floated into the air like a curtain falling on a battle written in flame and fury. The Redemption Creek Valley lay in quiet stillness after days of storm and fire. Franklin Pierce vanished from the land, unable to show his face again after such a humiliating defeat. The thug Ben, bloodied and broken, also fled, leaving behind only ash, gunpowder, and the memory of a night that lit the sky red. The ghosts that once haunted My Lin and Jasper had finally faded away. The ranch, though scorched at the roof and scarred by bullet holes, still stood tall. And within that damage, a new home was being built. Mai Lin cleared the ashes, her tireless hand sorting through the debris. Jasper chopped wood and lifted the heavy beams. She mended, he raised the fence. They worked not just as partners, but as companions. No need for many words, just shared glances and movements that fit like clockwork. That evening, as the cattle returned slowly from pasture, Mai Lin sat on the porch. On her face, her dark eyes held a strange, peaceful light. She placed one small hand on her belly and whispered, "I never thought I would live to call any place home." Jasper stood beside her, silent for a long time, then wrapped an arm around her shoulders. It was not a gesture of impulse. It was a life's decision. In the red light of sunset washing over the fields, he was no longer a lonely rancher, and she was no longer a castaway. They were two broken souls who had found each other, mended by choice. The townsfolk still gossiped. They still whispered about the foreigner, but Jasper paid them no mind. He walked with her through the market, held her hand in the middle of the street. The way he stood beside her quieted every mocking laugh, and soon they no longer saw the woman who was too small and foreign. They saw a strong wife walking beside her husband. A month later, the doctor from Prescott came to check on Mai Lin's healing wounds and smiled as he delivered the news. She was pregnant. The words lit a fire of joy inside the small wooden house. Jasper sat quietly on the steps for a long while, eyes on the open fields, pipe smoke curling in the air. The pain of losing his wife and child slowly faded, replaced now by the image of a child yet to be born. On the final night of summer, beneath the wooden porch, Mai Lin rested her head on Jasper's shoulder. Together, they watched the starlit sky in silence. Out there on the prairie, they were no longer lone survivors. They were a family. In the harsh land of the West, no one chooses where they are born, but they can choose who they live with. A home, even built from charred timber, stands stronger than any fortress when it is held together by love and trust. That is family, the greatest treasure a person can have.